This doesn't feel like the moment your life will change, does it? It feels like one of those in-between chapters where you're not broken enough to give up, but not settled enough to feel at peace. It feels like standing in a hallway, the old door's shut, the new one's still quiet, and your heart saying something is different, but your mind saying, I don't have proof yet. You've been waking up lately with a strange mixture of fatigue and anticipation, not the kind that comes from excitement alone, the deeper kind, the kind that comes from surviving something you never thought you'd make it through, yet sensing that the story isn't finished. It's the energy of someone who has carried invisible weight and still stood tall enough to say, tomorrow deserves a chance. There's something sacred about uncertainty that no one talks about, not the glamorized version, not the aesthetic quote version, the real version, the version where you stare at your life mentally like it's a puzzle dumped onto the floor. No box, no reference photo, no instructions, just scattered pieces labeled past hurt, unanswered prayers, human disappointment, near misses, lessons learned the hard way. And yet, here you are, hands still open, waiting for a sign that it'll change. Let's honor that for a moment, because you've been doing life in a way that looks quiet to outsiders, but is widely noticed in the spiritual world. There are people who break when life bruises them once, and then there are people like you who keep rising through seasons where the hits didn't even come one at a time. They came overlapping, like waves that didn't bother to ask whether you could swim before showing up. You've grieved things you never posted. You've rebuilt parts of yourself without applause. You've said, I'm fine, so convincingly that sometimes even you believed it. You've wrestled with futures you couldn't interpret. You've had nights where surrendering felt easier than hoping again. But courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes courage looks like lying down at midnight and whispering back to life, try me again. I'm still here. And the divine has been watching the whole thing. Not from a distance, but from front row center. If the universe kept a gallery, your name would be framed under the exhibit titled, They Stayed Soft Even When Life Got Sharp. If heaven recorded your statistics, it wouldn't count your missteps or confusion. It would count the endurance points you didn't even realize you were earning. Let's talk about a moment you know well. The moment you realize you're strong, not because you feel strong, but because weakness never got the final vote, even when it tried. The days where getting up required negotiating with your spirit. The months where faith didn't feel like flying. It felt like limping forward, decorative enough so pain didn't embarrass you. The cycles that felt unfair, not because they stretched you, but because no one could explain why you had to stretch in the first place. But those unglamorous moments, that was the seasoning, not the ending. Right now, you're living in the quietest seconds before the music drops. Not the bass-heavy music that shocks you into sudden change, but the deeper composition, the kind that sounds like peace returning, clarity finally exhaling, and provision arriving like it always knew your address. Let's go to the bird for a moment, not for cute symbolism, but for truth. Birds don't wake up rehearsing anxiety. They don't host crisis meetings over nests that aren't built yet. They don't binge worst-case scenarios over seeds they haven't located. They rise with a confidence older than logic. They never carry groceries, yet a day never ends without them being fed. They don't attend architecture school, yet they craft homes sturdy enough to hold generations. They don't protest the weather, they build around it. Not because they're naive, but because provision is built into their design, and so is yours. You're not created to be abandoned halfway through elevation. You're not structured to reach a point where the universe says, well, from here on out, you're on your own. Divine orchestration doesn't escort you to the cliff and disappear. It waits with you in the fog, adjusting unseen currents, so that when you take flight, the wind doesn't fight you, it carries you. Your story has been developing in a hidden rhythm, a letting go phase you thought was loss, but was actually space being cleared. A silence phase you thought was rejection, but was actually recalibration. A delay phase you thought was punishment, but was actually protection from arriving too early to something you weren't meant to meet yet. There are blessings that can only be recognized by a person who has touched contrast. You had to know the ache of almost arrival to appreciate alignment. You had to walk in misunderstanding long enough to discern truth from imitation. You had to lose cheaply crafted connections so you don't mishandle divinely calibrated ones later. You had to stand at a distance from who you once were long enough to feel the pull toward who you're becoming. Pain was never the destination. It was the sandpaper before the shine. Right now is not the before it gets good someday chapter. Right now is the soon you'll laugh that you ever doubted chapter. You don't need the entire map to move forward. You're not being asked to figure everything out. You're being asked to move with truth, even in confusion, to act with spiritual maturity, even in disappointment, to maintain sincerity, even when others played selfishly, to forgive, not because you're weak, but because resentment is too small a container for the season you're entering. Elevation isn't revenge. It's release. It's rising with integrity intact. It's saying, I refuse to become hard just because life tested my softness. You've been unknowingly participating in a cosmic initiation. The curriculum looked like endurance, and the final exam looked like integrity under pressure. You stayed honest where deceit was rewarded. You stayed soft where cynicism was easier. You prayed quietly when arrogance was louder. You showed up when optimism didn't. You rebuilt without applause. You trusted God without proof. You held on to truth more tightly than outcomes. You survived chapters that felt pointless because the point was being saved for later. And guess what? Later is almost here. The universe isn't excited to rescue you. It's excited for you to recognize yourself again. Not the version you had to shrink into for survival. Not the one built out of compromise or exhaustion, but the one that was always there beneath the dust, the doubt, and the detours. Right now, you are living in the seconds where life shifts from being a story you endure into one you finally understand. Clarity is about to stop feeling like information you collect and start feeling like a home you return to. Not cold facts, not checklists, not logic alone, but the sudden warmth of remembering something you always carried but couldn't translate yet. It's the kind of knowing that doesn't arrive loudly. It doesn't shake your world like thunder. It settles into your bones like a truth you've rehearsed for lifetimes, even though you only realized it recently. This clarity feels like walking into a familiar room after years of darkness, flicking on the light and whispering to yourself, oh, this is where I was meant to stand. Love, too, is transforming its language in your life. You are entering the chapter where love is no longer something you analyze for danger signs, no longer a visitor you greet cautiously at the gate of your heart. Instead, it becomes recognition, a sense of, I've seen this energy before. Not in people who hurt me, but in the design of something that feels safe without negotiation. You won't need to interrogate intentions anymore. Your spirit will identify sincerity instantly because you've spent enough years memorizing the texture of disappointment. The contrast trained you. The heartbreak refined you. The abandonment didn't close you. It calibrated you. Now, love doesn't feel suspicious. It feels correct, like a missing puzzle piece that finally clicks without force. Opportunity is approaching you differently now, too. It will no longer tiptoe like a rumor. It will no longer appear wrapped in ambiguity or maybe. It will arrive so clearly that doubt won't have time to intercept it. It will only have time to watch it happen. Because opportunities that are divinely timed don't need persuasion. They don't require panic or chasing. They don't ask you to beg or contort yourself to fit them. They appear like a path parting, like life leaning in and saying, this one is yours. No audition required. You will feel the shift, not in your head first, but in your nervous system, in your intuition, in that quiet voice that no longer flinches at the idea of good things happening. Peace is changing its posture inside you. You used to think peace meant the absence of problems, the end of turbulence, the moment life finally stops demanding more from you. But the peace you're stepping into now is deeper. It isn't about problems disappearing, it's about them losing relevance. Worry won't dramatically exit the stage like a defeated villain. It will simply realize it no longer belongs in the script, because your spirit will be too occupied with alignment to entertain anxiety. This peace feels like not everything is solved, but nothing feels threatening enough to consume me anymore. It feels like exhaling after years of subconscious breath holding. It feels like realizing that your nervous system has finally declared independence from past fear. Confusion will feel like a language you once spoke fluently, but now can't remember how to pronounce. Not because you suddenly know everything, but because you finally know what is no longer yours to carry. And that alone clears enough mental noise to make space for revelation. Momentum is breathing again in your life. Not the chaotic, desperate, fix it now or else momentum, but the ancient, rhythmic kind. The kind that moves without rushing. The kind that doesn't need proof to proceed. The kind that flows like a current that has been practicing your arrival long before you emotionally felt prepared for it. It feels like tides shifting because the moon whispered a command, and the universe whispers commands for you, too. Subtle gravitational instructions rearranging circumstances, people, timing, and alignment behind the curtain of your awareness. You can't see the mechanics, just like the bird can't see the pantry in the sky from which it is fed. But lack of visibility is not lack of involvement. The unseen has been working overtime on your behalf. Orchestration happens in the invisible. Preparation happens in the quiet. Growth often looks like nothing until it looks like everything. You've been incubated in a cocoon no one applauded, analyzed, or documented. A cocoon stitched out of resilience, pain you translated alone, lessons you passed without a witness, battles you survived without a cheering squad. And now, you are living in the hour where the cocoon dissolves, and the butterfly doesn't ask permission. It simply unfolds. What you survived was not the interruption. It was the qualification. The wait was training. The silence was shaping. The delay was designing. The disappointment was refining. The exhaustion was building spiritual muscle. None of it was pointless. None of it was accidental. None of it was permanent. Now comes the moment of recognition. The aha moment is warming up. The fog is thinning. The confirmation is not months away. It is steps away. So don't worry that you can't see the full path yet. You're not meant to. Birds don't. But they still eat. They still fly. They still nest. They still live. And so will you. But bigger, wiser, lighter, clearer. Here's your declaration. Not to me, but to the universe itself. I walk forward with truth in my hands and surrender in my heart. And this time, it isn't a whisper. It's a vow. There is someone you know, sitting in their own hallway chapter, quiet, tired, invisibly carrying weight, trying to translate their own puzzle without a reference photo. Someone who needs to know their shine time is near. Share this with them, because spiritual confirmation sounds louder when echoed between two awakening hearts. And sometimes, the sign you're waiting for becomes stronger when you become the sign for someone else.